Thanksgiving at the Iron Rose wasn't supposed to be a battle. It was a family tradition, apparently. My wife Michelle's family booked the same private room every year, the same upscale restaurant just off Commonwealth Avenue. The white linen, vintage chandeliers, waiters who called everyone sir or ma'am, everything screamed polished perfection, but underneath all that gloss, there was something rotten. My name's Alex, and I've been married to Michelle for 6 years. And for 6 years, I've been treated like a guest in my own marriage, especially by her family. Her father, Benjamin, has this way of looking at me like I'm some underqualified intern who snuck into his boardroom by mistake. Her brothers, Samuel and Daniel, follow his lead like loyal executives, always laughing just a bit too hard at Benjamin's jokes, always finding a reason to steer the conversation away from me. I tried, I really did. I kept telling myself they'd warm up eventually, that I'd earn my place, that maybe one day I'd walk into one of these dinners and feel like I belonged. That day never came, not even close. When we arrived that evening, the host greeted Benjamin like he owned the place. Maybe he did. I don't know. Michelle and I walked in together, but by the time we made it to the table, she had already split off to chat with her brothers. Hugs, jokes, clinking glasses. I got a nod from Daniel, nothing from Samuel. Benjamin raised a brow in my direction and then went back to talking about wine pairings like I didn't exist. Classic. Dinner was fine, or at least passable. Benjamin went on about his latest business expansion, Daniel's renovation project, Samuel's new Tesla. The first stayed quiet, as usual. I wasn't asked about my life. Not my job, not my latest recipe wins at the restaurant, not even a "how you been?" Just silence, polite, practiced, deliberate silence. But I smiled. I always smiled. Until dessert. That's when Benjamin clapped his hands and said, "Before we dig into the pie, we've got a little something for the family." Every year, they did this little Thanksgiving appreciation thing. Benjamin handed out personalized gifts. Not out of love, mind you, but as a performance. A way to show off how generous he was. Michelle got a diamond tennis bracelet. Daniel got a signed Red Sox jersey. Samuel got a limited edition cigar humidor. Even the nieces and nephews got wrapped packages tied with gold ribbon. And me? Nothing. Not even a card. Benjamin looked right at me and smiled. "Ah, we must have forgotten about you, Alex. Guess we assumed you'd still be washing dishes at that little bistro of yours." They all laughed. Michelle, too. And something in me, something deep, cracked. But I didn't flinch. I smiled right back and said, "That's okay. I didn't forget about you." The laughter stopped. I reached under my chair and pulled out a small, perfectly wrapped box. Set it down in front of Benjamin, slid it across the table like I was presenting him with dessert. His grin wavered. "What's this?" he asked, voice half curious, half suspicious. "Open it," I said, casually sipping my wine. He tore through the wrapping slowly, deliberately. The box opened with a click. Inside was a thick manila envelope. No card, no note. Just documents. He pulled them out and started flipping through. First page, a breakdown of income reports from his catering business. Second page, discrepancies in declared earnings. Third page, tax forms. Real ones. Filed, doctored, and copied over the years. His face went pale. The brothers leaned in. Michelle stopped smiling. I leaned back and let the silence sit. It was delicious. Benjamin blinked, then whispered, "Where did you get this?" I raised an eyebrow. Had some time on my hands. Turns out it's amazing what you find when people forget you exist. And that was the moment the table shifted. The air got heavier. The smirks faded. Michelle's bracelet looked a lot less shiny. That was just the beginning. Benjamin held those documents like they were radioactive. His hands trembled, and his eyes darted across each line like they might rearrange themselves into a better version of reality if he stared hard enough. Spoiler, they didn't. He flipped a page, then another. The silence around the table was so thick you could cut it with the same knives they used to carve the turkey. Across from him, Samuel leaned over to peek. His smirk died on the spot. "What the hell is this?" Benjamin finally asked. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Michelle. She didn't respond. That was new. Normally, she'd jump to her father's defense, smooth things over, paint me as dramatic. But now, she was still and quiet and staring at the pages like they were unraveling something even she hadn't expected. So I answered for her. "Receipts," I said plainly. "Backdated reports. Duplicate tax filings. Undeclared income." Your little side gig isn't as invisible as you thought. Benjamin's jaw clenched. You went digging into my business? I shrugged. I was excluded from your family for 6 years. You'd be amazed how much research a man can do when he's not invited to Thanksgiving planning calls. That got a reaction. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Samuel scratched the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Even the kids stopped playing with their toys. Benjamin's voice dropped. You have no idea what you're doing. I think I do, I replied, calm and steady. And so will the IRS, if I press send. His eyes widened. There was real panic now, not just annoyance. This was the look of a man who realized the vault door had been left wide open and someone just turned on all the lights. But that wasn't even the worst part. Michelle stood up. Her napkin dropped to the floor, unnoticed. She walked over to her father, pulled a few pages from the stack, and scanned them. The color drained from her face. This is real? She whispered. Benjamin looked cornered. I was going to fix it, he muttered. It's just paperwork. Some creative accounting. Michelle looked like she'd just been slapped. You told me there wasn't enough to help us with the IVF, she said. The room froze. Michelle, Benjamin began, but she cut him off. You said there wasn't enough to pay for the second round. You said the business was struggling. And all this time, her voice cracked. I didn't want to involve you, he said weakly. It wasn't your concern. Her concern. His daughter. His only daughter. And it wasn't her concern. I watched Michelle process the betrayal. And for the first time, I didn't feel satisfaction. Just sorrow. Because that's the moment I realized maybe I hadn't just lost a marriage. Maybe she had too. Samuel finally spoke up. Why are there withdrawals from my account on here? Benjamin went rigid. That's not what it looks like. Daniel leaned over, scanning the paperwork faster now. You said the house loan didn't go through because of my credit score. Benjamin said nothing. You lied to us, Samuel muttered. You told me not to buy the new place. You said we couldn't afford to back me if anything went wrong. I had to do it that way, Benjamin barked. I carried this family for decades. You think it's easy? You think your mortgage payments are more important than keeping this whole thing afloat? Michelle dropped the papers on the table with a thud. Dad, she said, voice like glass, how much of this is even legal? He didn't answer. Then Richard, Benjamin's husband, usually quiet, always loyal, picked up the last page and read it. His face slowly shifted from confusion to fury. Benjamin, he said, his voice low and shaking, why is there a transfer from my retirement account listed here? Benjamin's head shot up. Don't lie, Richard continued. Don't tell me this is an error. Benjamin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Michelle whispered, you said the market took a dip. You blamed the investment firm. Now Richard was fully red. His voice cracked. I worked my entire life for that money. That was ours. He stood up so fast his chair nearly fell back. One hand clutched his chest, the other still holding the page. He staggered slightly. Richard? Michelle cried. And then he collapsed. Everything blurred. People screamed. Someone shouted for a phone. Daniel called 911. A waiter burst in. I dropped to the floor with Michelle beside me. She was sobbing, trying to wake him up. I checked his pulse, still there, but thready. He was breathing. Barely. Benjamin stood frozen like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. You did this, Michelle snapped at him, tears pouring down her face. You let this happen! He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because in that moment, the empire he built, the family reputation, the legacy, the control, shattered. And we were all sitting in the ruins. Hospitals don't have a smell, they have a mood. A strange, sterile stillness that seeps into your bones. As we waited for news on Richard, the only thing more suffocating than the antiseptic air was the silence between us. Michelle sat across from me, eyes glassy, hands clenched in her lap. Her brothers were pacing, whispering to each other, but too shocked to raise their voices. Benjamin sat in the corner, like he was carved from marble, expressionless, unmoving. For once, he wasn't directing the room. I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt the power that comes with exposing someone like him. But all I felt was tired and empty. Still think I went too far? I asked quietly, not looking at Michelle. She didn't answer. When the doctor finally emerged with an update, minor cardiac episode, stabilized, staying overnight, it felt like someone hit a release valve on the tension in the room. Michelle buried her face in her hands. Daniel sighed. Samuel slumped into a chair like his bones had given out. And Benjamin, he just stood, no reaction. Like the man he built a life with hadn't almost died in front of his family. It was Michelle who broke the spell. She turned to him, her voice hoarse. You used his money, Dad. You emptied his retirement and let him believe it was gone in the market. He almost died, thinking he failed us. Benjamin's jaw tightened. I had to use it. You wouldn't understand. Make me understand, she snapped. Because none of this makes sense. You had money. You told us we couldn't afford anything. And now you're sitting here like a statue while he's hooked up to machines. Still nothing. I needed it to keep the business alive, Benjamin finally muttered. The catering company? Daniel asked. The one you said was self-sustaining? The one you bragged about having streamlined? Things got complicated. Samuel scoffed. You mean you started cutting corners? Benjamin's voice was suddenly sharp. I made choices. I carried this family while you all played at being grown-ups. You think Michelle's fancy apartment paid for itself? You think Daniel's mortgage didn't bounce back on me when he missed his second payment? Daniel flinched. You offered to help. I protected this family, Benjamin barked. No, Michelle whispered. You controlled it. Every gesture, every dime came with strings we couldn't see until they wrapped around our necks. There it was. The thing none of us wanted to admit. Benjamin's money hadn't been support, it had been a leash. And suddenly, I saw it all so clearly. The way he kept everyone close with just enough generosity to make them feel safe while slowly undermining their independence. Samuel's business floundered under his thumb. Daniel's loan fell apart when Benjamin pulled out mid-renovation. Michelle and I, we were supposed to beg for help with IVF. But when we didn't, he punished us, he made it personal, and I'd let it go on. For years. That's what made me angriest. Not what he did, but what I didn't. Benjamin finally turned to me. This was your idea. You did this. I met his eyes. No, you did this. I just made sure you couldn't keep hiding, he sneered. You're not family. You never were. And maybe that was the truth. But it didn't sting the way he hoped. I know, I said. That's the difference. I stopped pretending. Michelle stood slowly. Her voice was low, steady, but I knew that tone it came from the same place I found mine the night I handed Benjamin that box. Dad, she said, you stole from your husband, from your kids. You let Mom believe you were saving for retirement. You made us beg for scraps while you siphoned money into hidden accounts. Benjamin didn't blink. We're going to fix it, she continued, but not for you. We'll fix it for Richard, for everyone you burned along the way. You're done. You can't cut me out, Benjamin snapped. Daniel finally stepped forward. Watch us. We left the hospital around 2 a.m. Michelle and I didn't speak on the drive home. She stared out the window, the blur of city lights flickering across her face. I kept both hands on the wheel, not trusting myself to say what I was really thinking, that maybe we'd never come back from this. When we got home, she went straight to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat down without a word. I followed. You okay? I asked. She didn't answer at first. Then, was this always your plan? That caught me off guard. What? She really looked at me for the first time that night. Her eyes weren't angry, but they weren't soft either. Just tired. Haunted. Did you plan to blow this up? To wait for the perfect moment and just tear it all down? I shook my head. No. I just got tired of pretending I wasn't watching it burn. She set the glass down gently. I should have stopped them. I should have stood up for you years ago. You should have, I said. She nodded. No excuses. I don't know if I can fix this, she added quietly. I don't think you're supposed to fix it, I replied. You just have to decide what you want to build from the ashes. We sat in silence for a while after that, and maybe that silence meant we still had something. Or maybe it meant it was already gone. The following morning, I woke to an empty side of the bed. Michelle was already in the kitchen, scrolling through something on her phone. The TV was off. Her coffee had gone cold. I could tell she hadn't slept much, if at all. You heard from the hospital? I asked. She nodded, but didn't look up. He's stable, awake. They're keeping him another day. That should have been good news. But it didn't change what had happened. A heart attack, caused by betrayal, not genetics. I made myself a cup of coffee, even though I didn't want it. The ritual felt necessary. Something to keep my hands busy, while my head filled with the static of everything left unsaid. Benjamin called twice, Michelle finally said. I didn't answer. I nodded slowly. Don't. She blinked. You really think it's that simple? No. But I think you've spent your entire life answering when you shouldn't have. That landed somewhere deep. She looked down at her mug. I keep wondering, she whispered. What if I'd seen it earlier? What if I'd looked harder? Asked more questions. You wanted to believe he was better than he was, I said. We all did. Around noon, Daniel and Samuel stopped by. They didn't knock, they just walked in like they'd done 1,000 times before. Except this time, they looked like men carrying grief on their backs. Daniel dropped a folder on the table. I printed the bank records, he said, from Dad's account and the shared trust. Michelle picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Transfers, Samuel muttered. Over 100K in under 2 years, funneled into shell accounts through the catering business, then pulled back out into private accounts under Benjamin's name. Jesus, Michelle whispered. And that's just what we found in a few hours, Daniel added. If we had a forensic accountant, we do, I interrupted. All eyes turned to me. I sent everything to someone I know. Quiet guy. Retired IRS. He owed me a favor. He's combing through the rest. Daniel let out a slow breath. You really planned for this? No, I said, but I stopped waiting for it to fix itself. That afternoon, Michelle made the call to Richard. They talked for 23 minutes. I didn't hear the full conversation, but I saw her posture change with every minute, shoulders squaring, voice growing steadier. When she hung up, she turned to us. Dad's hiring a lawyer, she said. He's filing for divorce. Nobody said a word, because we all knew what that meant. No reconciliation, no saving face, no sweep under the rug family narrative, just the end. And in the ruins of that legacy, something else bloomed. Accountability. Later that evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting it to be the investigator. It was Benjamin. I should have hung up. Alex, he began, tone calm, composed like nothing had happened. We need to talk. No, I said. You need to listen. He laughed cold, mechanical. You think you've won something? I think I took back my place in a family that never wanted me in the first place, I replied. You ruined this family, he hissed. No, I said. You did that. When you started treating your power like a birthright. When you made love conditional. When you made your kids compete for your approval like it was a goddamn prize. Benjamin's voice dropped to a growl. You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think you're better than me. I don't need to be better, I said. Just done. And then I hung up. That night, Michelle sat on the floor of our living room, surrounded by photo albums. I almost didn't say anything, but eventually, I sat beside her. You okay? I asked. She held up a picture of her as a child, sitting on Benjamin's shoulders at some 4th of July parade. She didn't answer for a while. He used to tell me I could be anything, she whispered. I believed him. I know, I said. I used to think if I was just better, smarter, quieter, if I didn't complain, if I didn't ask for too much, maybe then he'd see me, really see me. He saw what he wanted, I said. You don't need to shrink to fit into that. She wiped her face with her sleeve. You know what hurts the most? What? I let him treat you the same way. That stopped me. She looked me dead in the eye. I'm sorry, Alex. I should have stood up for you. I should have chosen you. Every time. I didn't. I let him convince me you were lucky just to be in the room. A long pause. I was wrong. There it was. The apology I didn't even know I needed. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I did say thank you, and that was enough. Later, we made a decision. Michelle texted Samuel and Daniel. I called my investigator friend, and together we compiled everything, documents, transfers, audio from Madison. Yes, she'd reappeared, more on that later. Enough evidence to bury Benjamin in legal paperwork for a decade. We weren't out for blood. We were out for truth. For the record. For everyone he'd manipulated into silence. But the final meeting wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was just inevitable. We gathered in Richard's lawyer's office. Benjamin had tried to push for a private conversation. Let's handle this as a family, he said. Like, the words still held any weight. But Richard wanted it documented, recorded, handled legally. Paper speaks louder than nostalgia, he told Michelle. She nodded without a word. So there we sat, Benjamin in a pressed suit, clenching a pen so hard his knuckles were white. Richard beside his attorney, frail but composed. Michelle on one side of me, Daniel and Samuel behind. Even the air in the room felt like it was holding its breath. Before we begin, the lawyer said, I'd like to state for the record that all parties have reviewed the financial report. including evidence of unauthorized withdrawals from shared accounts, misappropriation of business assets, and tax discrepancies. Benjamin didn't flinch. He just stared at me. Anything to add, Mr. Morrison? The lawyer asked him. Benjamin leaned forward, voice steady. Yes. I'd like to say this entire spectacle is built on betrayal. My so-called family has turned their back on me because one outsider decided he didn't like the rules. Michelle stirred beside me. Richard remained still. Benjamin looked directly at her. I did this for you, he said. For all of you. You did it for yourself, she replied, evenly. And now it's done. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Long enough to review the estate separation. Long enough to dissolve his financial power. Long enough for Benjamin to realize no amount of persuasion would win him this room back. When it ended, Richard stood slower than usual, but with more dignity than I'd seen in a long time. You took my trust and buried it beneath your ego, he said. Benjamin said nothing. I want you to leave the house by Friday. Still nothing. You won't have access to any shared assets from here on out, Richard added. And the catering business, what's left of it, will be liquidated. I'd rather see it gone than let you use it as a shield. Benjamin blinked. Twice. Then finally, you're all fools. Michelle stood. Maybe. But at least we're not yours anymore. The next day, we hosted a small gathering, nothing formal. Just the family that remained. Richard, recovering, but spirited. Sharon and Diane, emotionally wrecked, but lighter somehow. Daniel brought coffee and muffins. Samuel brought his dog. Michelle made soup. I brought peace. Real peace. Not the kind I used to chase in silence. The kind you build when you finally stop asking for permission to exist. We didn't talk about Benjamin much. When we did, it was mostly in the context of repair. Who needed to change their account access? Who wanted to start therapy? Who needed space? We talked like survivors, and it felt honest. As the others left that night, Michelle lingered at the door with Richard. The first proud of you, he said quietly. Michelle smiled, eyes shining. I'm proud of me too. That small sentence was everything. We went home, and in the stillness of our own kitchen, Michelle turned to me. I want to start over. I thought she meant with me. I hoped she did. But then she said, I want to start us over, not from scratch, but from choice. I want to build something that looks nothing like where I came from. My chest ached a little at the beauty of that. So I said the only thing I could, okay. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was handwritten. Benjamin's script, elegant and precise, like the man himself. No return address. Michelle opened it at the table. I watched her expression shift with each line: confusion, then disappointment, then anger. She passed it to me. The letter read like a lament. Not quite an apology, but a vague acknowledgement of how things fell apart. He blamed stress, he blamed business, he blamed me. What he never did, blame himself. At the bottom, he'd written, You were always so soft, Michelle. The first thought you'd understand eventually. Maybe Alex will let you come to your senses. Michelle tore it in half, then into quarters, then into scraps so small they looked like snow. The next morning, she changed her last name. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for revenge. It was for her. And that mattered more than anything else. So here's where it lands. Benjamin moved to Florida. We heard from an accountant friend that the IRS was still reviewing his history. I doubt he sleeps well. Richard, on the other hand, seems to be thriving. He's learning to cook. Took up piano again. Smiles more. Laughs easier. The kids? They talk to each other. Without filters. Without wondering if their dad's listening through the walls. And us, Michelle and I, well, we're learning too. That love isn't loyalty at all costs. That silence is not peace. That choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's sacred. One night, months later, she turned to me in bed and whispered, You never wanted to destroy my family. You just wanted to be seen. I smiled into the dark. I wanted us to matter.